Disclaimer: it's inspired by reality, shaped by imagination.
What happens when Gary Oldman walks onto the Loose Women set and refuses to play by the rules? This wasn't just a chat. It was about to become one of the most explosive moments in daytime TV. From icy stares to sharp words, the tension built fast until the audience realized this was no ordinary interview. The cameras rolled, lights buzzing, as Gary strode in calm but radiating intensity. Applause erupted, some standing, some gasping. The rare sight of the legendary actor in a daytime setting had everyone captivated. Across from him, Denise Welch sat with her trademark grin, poised, playful, yet charged, as if she already knew sparks were about to fly. At first, it seemed friendly. Compliments, jokes, laughter, and casual anecdotes about Gary's latest projects and Denise's TV highlights. But the moment the topic of climax change in modern storytelling came up, the mood shifted. Denise leaned forward, eyes glinting with curiosity, while Gary's expression tightened, a flicker of seriousness crossing his face. From polite smiles to brewing tension, from playful banter to an undercurrent of conflict, the stage was set. Cameras captured every twitch, every smirk. The audience had no idea they were about to witness a clash that would dominate social media the very next day.
The applause still echoed as Gary Oldman made his way to the guest chair, settling into the soft leather with the quiet dignity that has defined his decades-long career. Denise Welch, perched opposite him, gave a mischievous smile, leaning slightly forward as if to say, "I know you're intense, but let's see how this goes." The audience responded with chuckles, some whispering excitedly to neighbors about the rare pairing of legendary actor and sharp-tongued TV host. "Gary, it's an absolute delight to have you here," Denise began warmly, her tone playful but respectful. "I feel like we need to start with something light, maybe the most important question. How do you get that perfect messy hair look in your roles? It's iconic." Gary chuckled softly, a low, gravelly laugh that drew a few appreciative whistles from the audience. "Ah, the secrets of an actor's craft," he said, leaning back. "Honestly, some days it's just chaos, and some days it's magic. But I have to admit, a little chaos makes the character believable." His eyes sparkled, a hint of humor breaking through his usual intensity. Denise laughed, tilting her head. "I knew it. I've always suspected there's method to your madness. And speaking of madness, any funny stories from set, something the audience would never expect from someone like you?" Gary's face softened, and he began recounting a moment from a film shoot where a costume mishap left him wearing a hat twice the size of his head for an entire scene. The audience laughed as he animatedly described the chaos, waving his hands as if to illustrate the absurdity. Denise chimed in, teasing, "And did you finally convince the director to let you keep it, or was that a hard no?" Gary smiled, shaping his head. "They were relentless, but it made for a story I still enjoy telling." As the laughter died down, the conversation shifted gently toward family and personal updates. Denise spoke of her recent charity work, sharing a heartfelt moment about her children. Gary nodded appreciatively, offering glimpses into his own family life without giving away too much, enough to make the audience feel the warmth behind his public persona. Subtle nods, lean-ins, and soft smiles filled the set, creating an intimate atmosphere that felt far from the chaos of live TV. And yet, beneath the friendly exchange, subtle seeds of tension had been planted. Denise, ever sharp and perceptive, made a passing comment about how modern storytelling sometimes changes climactic moments to please audiences, hinting at the controversy to come. Gary's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, barely noticeable, but enough for those paying close attention. His gaze lingered, a flicker of thought passing behind his eyes, and the audience, oblivious to the brewing storm, continued to laugh and clap. The host, sensing the energy, teased, "It sounds like we're about to dive deep today, or at least stir a few waters." Denise leaned in, eyes glinting, while Gary tilted his head, nodding ever so slightly as if to acknowledge that, yes, the conversation was about to become more serious. The friendly facade remained for now. Jokes, smiles, and anecdotes still dominated the stage, but every laugh and compliment now carried a quiet tension, like the calm before a storm. The audience, captivated by the chemistry, had no idea that what began as a warm, engaging chat was already inching toward a clash that would leave them gasping, social media buzzing, and the studio floor crackling with electricity. And in that brief pause, Gary adjusted his posture, Denise smirked knowingly, and the camera caught the subtle exchange that would signal the start of a debate neither of them could walk back from.
The host, sensing a perfect transition, leaned in with a sly smile. Gary, Denise, let's talk about something a bit more controversial. What are your thoughts on climax changes in modern films and TV? You know, when a story's ending is altered, sometimes to please audiences or avoid controversy. Gary, you've portrayed some of the most intense characters in cinematic history. How do you feel about this trend? Gary's jaw tightened subtly. He leaned forward, his hands resting on his knees, eyes fixed on Denise. I think it's a delicate balance, he said carefully. A climax isn't just an ending, it's the culmination of everything that came before. Changing it just to suit a mood or trend, it risks undermining the story's integrity, and honestly, it undercuts the actor's craft too. Denise tilted her head, her tone playful yet pointed. I hear you, Gary, but isn't storytelling also about evolution? Audiences change. They want surprises. Sometimes a shift in the climax can make a story more relatable, more human. She leaned in, voice rising slightly. You can't just cling to tradition and expect every viewer to connect with it. Gary's eyes narrowed, voice steady but firm. I'm not against evolution, Denise, but the change has to feel earned, not forced. You can't wrap up a story in a way that betrays the narrative just to appease trends or social media outrage. That's what frustrates me. Stories losing their soul. Denise's smile faltered for a second, her arms crossing defensively. Soul? She echoed. Gary, storytelling is collaborative. Writers, directors, actors, audiences, we all influence the ending. Pretending one vision is the only valid one, that's elitist. Audiences deserve to feel involved. The audience shifted, some leaning forward with anticipation, others murmuring to neighbors. Gasps punctuated the studio as Denise's tone sharpened. Gary's fingers drummed lightly on the armrest, eyes flicking to the camera. The tension was palpable. You're missing my point, Gary said, his voice rising just enough to command attention without shouting. I'm not dismissing the audience. I'm saying that the climax is the story's moral, its emotional payoff. You tamper with that lightly, and you risk erasing everything that makes it meaningful. Denise leaned closer, elbows on her knees, a fire in her eyes. And you're missing mine. Audiences today are part of the story. They live it, they talk about it, they influence it. Clinging to old rules doesn't make a story better, it makes it irrelevant. The host tried to interject, but the back and forth had gained momentum. Gary's voice took on a sharper edge, Denise's came back in kind, and the audience reacted audibly, some cheering, some shocked, a few laughing nervously at the rising tension. Camera cuts caught every detail, Denise's animated gestures, Gary's controlled but intense posture, the subtle narrowing of eyes, the half-smile of restrained challenge. A pause. Gary exhaled slowly, a visible flash of patience wearing thin. You don't understand the responsibility. The actor's job, the storyteller's job, is to honor the story first. Everything else comes second. Denise's eyes sparkled, almost defiantly. And you don't understand the responsibility to the audience. Stories aren't yours alone. They belong to everyone who experiences them. If you can't see that, maybe you're too attached to your own ego. The studio grew quiet for a heartbeat, then a ripple of murmurs spread through the audience. Gasps, whispers, and soft applause punctuated the tension. Denise leaned back, folding her arms, while Gary sat rigid, a flicker of controlled exasperation on his face. The host tried again, voice slightly strained. Maybe we can explore both perspectives. But the momentum had shifted. The friendly banter of earlier acts was gone. What had been subtle tension was now a clash, sharp, public, and emotionally charged. Every word, glance, and gesture had the audience leaning in, and social media was already imagining the sound bites that could explode online. It was clear, the friendly stage was gone. The debate over climax changes had ignited a fire, and neither Gary nor Denise was willing to step back.
The studio had shifted. The playful laughter from earlier acts had faded, replaced by a thick tension that made the audience hold its collective breath. Denise's arms remained folded, her gaze sharp, but there was now a flicker of genuine curiosity in her eyes. Gary's posture, once relaxed, was taut, as if he was preparing to lay everything on the table. "Look," Gary began, his voice lower, almost reflective. "It's easy to talk about stories as if they're just entertainment, but for those of us who dedicate our lives to this craft, a story's climax is sacred. I remember working on a role years ago, a film that required me to reach deep, to bare myself emotionally in ways I'd never done before. The ending, it was everything. And then the studio changed it, altering the very moment that gave the story its heart." The audience went quiet. Gasps rippled through the room, and Denise's expression softened, a small part of her posture relaxing. Gary paused, eyes glistening faintly, a rare vulnerability that seemed to reach beyond the cameras. "I stayed on set for weeks, rehearsing, feeling every beat, believing I was honoring the story, only to see the climax altered for reasons that had nothing to do with the art. It felt like a betrayal, not just to me, but to the audience who deserved the truth of that story." Denise leaned forward, her sharp exterior giving way to empathy. "Gary, I get that," she said quietly, "and I've been on the other side too. Stories, television, films, they're not just work, they're emotional labor. I once had a script rewritten because the producers thought audiences wouldn't handle the climax. It left me feeling like my voice, my choices didn't matter, like what I'd poured myself into didn't count." The camera panned slowly over the audience. Some had their hands over their mouths, moved by the honesty. Others whispered to neighbors, clearly affected by the rare glimpse behind celebrity personas. The tension transformed. It was no longer just a debate over storytelling. It had become something human. Disappointment, vulnerability, and the cost of giving yourself fully to a craft only to see it compromised. Gary's hands clasped together, a subtle tremor in his fingers. "That's exactly it," he said almost to himself. "We give everything, our time, our hearts, our minds, and to see a story's emotional peak rewritten, it's devastating. And yet we continue, because we have to, because the audience deserves the truth, not a watered-down version of it." Denise's eyes glistened. She nodded slowly. "And yet we keep going. We keep fighting for those climaxes, for the moments that matter. Maybe that's why stories resonate, why audiences connect, because someone fought for them even when it was hard." A hush fell over the room. Cameras lingered on Gary, then Denise, capturing subtle glances and shifts, a lean in, a tight smile, a softened gaze. The audience responded viscerally, a few standing, clapping slowly, others murmuring in awe, some wiping away tears. It was the kind of moment daytime television rarely produced, raw, unfiltered emotion from two people who had spent lifetimes performing for the world. And yet, even as empathy bridged the divide, the tension remained. Denise straightened, a wry half-smile returning, and Gary's hands unclasped, resting firmly on his knees. Beneath the vulnerability lay the simmering clash of ideals, a reminder that while they understood each other's pain, the debate was far from over. The host, sensing the intensity, tried to interject with a lighter tone, but Gary and Denise barely noticed. The audience, captivated, leaned forward as if drawn into the heart of the debate itself. Social media would soon erupt with clips and sound bites, but in that moment, it was just them, two artists, two strong voices, revealing the human cost behind the stories we consume. For a fleeting moment, the clash was suspended. The emotional flashpoint had shifted the conversation, giving depth to the argument over climax change. Yet the storm was still building, ready to surge into the next act, the breaking point where words would collide and the audience would witness raw, unfiltered confrontation.
The studio's atmosphere had shifted from reflective tension to barely contained electricity. The smiles and laughter of earlier acts were gone, replaced by the sharp crackle of confrontation. Denise leaned forward, voice crisp and challenging. "Gary, I appreciate your passion, I really do, but at some point, isn't holding on to your old ideals just stubborn? Audiences evolve, stories evolve. You can't expect the world to bend to your way of thinking." Gary's eyes narrowed, his voice cutting through the hum of the audience. "Stubborn? Call it conviction. I've spent my life embodying characters with integrity, fully committing to their arcs. To see the climax, the culmination of everything, compromised for convenience or appeasement? That's not evolution, Denise, that's cowardice." The audience reacted immediately. Gasps, murmurs, and a ripple of applause mingled with shock. Camera cuts captured Denise's incredulous look, the way her hands gestured sharply in the air. "Cowardice? You think adapting to your audience is cowardice? It's survival. If you can't understand that, maybe you're too wrapped up in your ego to see the bigger picture." Gary leaned forward, fists lightly resting on his knees, intensity radiating. "And maybe you don't understand responsibility. Actors, storytellers, directors, we have a duty to truth. Not trends, not ratings, not fleeting opinions. You compromise that truth, you compromise the art itself." Denise slammed a hand lightly on the desk for emphasis. "Truth isn't a monologue, Gary. It's dialogue. It's engagement. It's about connection, not some ivory tower ideal." A stunned hush fell over the studio, broken by a smattering of applause and whispered commentary. The audience was split, some cheering Gary's fervor, others nodding at Denise's insistence on audience agency. The host intervened, voice firm but tense. "All right, maybe we can take a step back." But the moment had passed. Gary's gaze locked on Denise, unflinching. "Step back? No, this is exactly the moment that matters." Denise, leaning back in her chair, smirked but with a flash of steel in her eyes. "Then let's make it count." The exchange escalated rapidly. Words flew faster, sharper, each sentence carrying the weight of personal conviction. "You're missing the point entirely, Gary. The point is craft, integrity, and respect for the story. And you're missing reality. The point is relevance, evolution, and connecting with people who actually watch what we do." The audience's reactions intensified. Some clapped in support, others gasped, whispered, shocked at the raw honesty. Camera cuts captured Denise leaning forward, Gary's posture rigid, their eyes locked in a battle of wills. The studio felt electric, like it could ignite at any moment. Then, in a moment that left the room gasping, Denise stood abruptly. "Maybe some things just aren't meant to be debated," she explained, her voice echoing over the stunned murmurs of the audience. She turned toward the exit. A few audience members stood, unsure whether to cheer or remain silent, while others whispered frantically about the unfolding drama. Gary stayed seated, leaning back slightly, his expression unreadable but intense, as if the storm had only fueled him further. The host waved helplessly at the camera crew, producers signaling frantic instructions from the sidelines. The chaos was real, an unscripted, emotionally charged collision that few could have predicted. The cameras captured it all. Denise's walking out, Gary's steadfast gaze, the mixed reactions of the audience, and the tension lingering like smoke in the air. Social media would explode with clips in seconds. Hashtags were already forming in the minds of viewers watching from home. What began as a conversation about storytelling and climax had erupted into a full-blown emotional confrontation. And as the dust settled, it was clear no one in that studio would forget this clash anytime soon. The breaking point had arrived, raw, unfiltered, unforgettable.
The studio was still buzzing long after Denise's dramatic exit. Cameras lingered on Gary Oldman, sitting tall, his eyes thoughtful yet unyielding. For a moment, the audience seemed frozen, caught between admiration, shock, and disbelief. The clash had gone far beyond a debate about storytelling. It had become a raw display of conviction, vulnerability, and the intense pressures of creative integrity. Social media erupted almost instantly. Clips of the argument, Denise's abrupt walkout, and Gary's steely retorts spread across platforms, each frame dissected, debated, and shared. Hashtag Gary versus Denise began trending within minutes. Fans took sides, some praising Gary's unwavering dedication to craft, others applauding Denise's insistence on audience connection and relevance. Comments streamed in, dividing the internet like a live storm. Gary is a legend, telling the truth, versus Denise is right, storytelling must evolve. Back in the studio, the audience slowly settled. A few stood, clapping quietly, clearly moved by the honesty they had witnessed. Others whispered in awe, replaying the intensity of the moment in their minds. The host, regaining composure, addressed Gary gently. "That was something else. You've given everyone here and at home a lot to think about." Gary nodded. His usual guarded intensity softened just slightly. "I only hope people see that at the heart of it, it's about respect. Respect for stories, for characters, for the audience. Debate is healthy. Passion is healthy. But the moment we compromise what's meaningful, that's when art suffers." For a fleeting moment, the tension of the clash dissolved into reflection. The audience realized they had witnessed something rare, not just a celebrity confrontation, but a glimpse into the deep personal stakes behind the craft of storytelling. Cameras caught Gary's subtle exhale, a man who had stood firm, and Denise's determined gaze from offstage, both leaving a lasting impression on everyone who had tuned in. And as the lights dimmed slightly, the lingering energy in the studio reminded everyone that the debate would not end here. Clips would circulate, hashtags would trend, and conversations would continue across the globe. Some viewers would side with Gary, others with Denise, but one thing was certain: this was a confrontation that no one would forget. In the end, Gary's final words, soft but resolute, captured the essence of the clash. "Stories deserve their truth, and we must fight for that, no matter what anyone thinks."